The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But where your heart is not, your feet cannot go. However, when the burden is shared, the heavy load becomes light. Who will hear the cry? Who will hear the call? Who will go?
When I was a little girl growing up, going to the village was a must. I still go to the village, and there's sickness everywhere. People are dying, people are sick. They don't understand why, they've prayed, they can't get answers, and it's just there. Children watch their parents die, parents watch their children die, and you just don't understand it. What is this illness? And they just say it is Ciwon Zamani. It means it's a modern illness. And this modern illness is AIDS. It's just there.
For decades, the world has heard about the devastation that has visited the African continent. Devastation that has come unexpectedly and quickly.
The pandemic is beyond human imagination. I never saw any devastation hit Africa like this. I've been to about 6 different African countries, and the things I see, the people, the caricature of humanity that I see because of AIDS brings tears to my eyes.
Problème assez sérieux, puisque le sida, comme nous le savons aujourd'hui, menace la survie de l'humanité. Donc il y a des individus, il y a des familles, il y a des nations qui sont touchées au plus haut degré. Une nation comme la Côte d'Ivoire est sérieusement concernée par le phénomène. C'est donc un phénomène terrible.
The statistics are staring us in the face, and more than statistics, the reality is staring us in the face.
As the AIDS pandemic has swept through the continent, it has left in its wake a trail of desolation and millions of people, young and old, contemplating an uncertain future.
Until lately, it sounded so distant from us. Figures that were being churned out sounded unreal. But now, the picture is totally different. We now know that this scourge is very much with us.
I would say that there's no person in Zimbabwe who has no relative that has been killed by the AIDS pandemic. This goes to show how serious and how massive the problem and the challenge of the AIDS pandemic is in the country.
Except for slavery, nothing in history has taken the lives of so many black people in such a short period of time.
The problem is so enormous and overwhelming because we are burying our people every now and then. So it has become an enormous problem really in the church, and we are overwhelmed actually.
Imam Cisse, the chief imam of Abidjan, Ivory Coast capital city, believes Africa's faith community has no choice but to be involved in the fight against HIV and AIDS. He says Africa cannot fight against the pandemic alone, and that the faith community must rise up to the challenge.
We say in our African tradition, where your heart is not, your feet cannot reach there. That means when you love somebody, you go to him. You love us, and we love you also. We are all human beings. We have to, to put hands into hand and go straight to fight against this disease.
Things fall apart. The center cannot hold. As a result of HIV and AIDS, things indeed are falling apart in many parts of Africa. Constantly, we are confronted by alarming statistics that keep increasing with every passing year. Mind-boggling numbers in the millions. But let's just stop for a moment and recognize that these cold statistics represent real people. Actually, someone's father, mother, husband, wife, brother, sister, or friend. Men and women who were once the hope and future of their communities. Children once destined for great things, who now lie in shallow graves. Numbers represent real people. So just for a moment, let's talk about the numbers. Today, 40 million people around the world are living with HIV and AIDS. Of these, 25 million are in Africa. In 2002 alone, there were 5 million new HIV infections worldwide. A continent-by-continent picture provides the following breakdown. Eastern Europe and Central Asia, 250,000. East Asia and the Pacific, 270,000. South and Southeast Asia, 700,000. The Caribbean, 60,000. Latin America, 150,000. North Africa, 83,000. And in Sub-Saharan Africa alone, the number is an astronomical 3.5 million. It's estimated that since the AIDS pandemic began in the 1970s, more than 20 million have died in Africa alone. Of those, 5 million are children. Whole generations wiped out. What these figures represent for us in a very real sense is nothing short of a Holocaust. While Africa has only 10% of the world's population, it now accounts for 60% of the total worldwide population living with HIV and AIDS. But numbers and statistics can never fully measure the full extent of grief felt by survivors. For millions who are affected, this crisis is real. For them, unless people of goodwill join hands together to help fight this terrible disease, the future is uncertain.
We have a lot of challenges concerning this disease. One is the number of people who are falling sick is really alarming, and therefore there are so many people who are sick, and we can't accommodate them. For instance, even in our hospitals.
The disease is a threat to humanity, and we must all fight to combat it.
Panessa Seal is the CEO and founder of the Balm in Gilead, an NGO based in New York City.
We have a major crisis in our community, and I don't know what to do except to continue to do what I do, to get people to understand that we are in a race for our lives.
For almost 15 years, the Balm in Gilead has worked with thousands of African-American churches, developing strategies for fighting AIDS and the stigma associated with the disease.
And Panessa Seal is a very courageous woman who has called the black church to conscience as someone who's allowed herself to be used of God, a catalyst for helping people to think through theologically, what would God have us to do in this situation?
One of the Balm in Gilead's major legacies is the introduction of a National Day of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS, an annual event that now helps thousands of churches in the African-American community join hands together to pray for those infected and affected by HIV and AIDS.
An idea came to do a Harlem Week of Prayer for the healing of AIDS, because black folk, we know how to pray. When we say, let's come together and pray, people drop everything, and that's what happened.
Panessa says she and her team are driven by a strong sense of mission and the distinct possibility of a looming catastrophe.
1 in every 50 black men living in the United States are HIV positive. 1 in every 160 black women are HIV infected. In some African American communities, 1 in 5 people are infected. And clearly those numbers mirror some of the rates in Africa.
The Balm in Gilead's success and credibility are some of the reasons many believe it can become a bridge builder and help bring much-needed resources to the African continent.
I feel that we are a part of Africa and we need to be involved on the continent. HIV and AIDS has affected black people around the world in a similar fashion. And so we see the connectedness, unfortunately, through this particular condition.
Reverend Evet Mugarura is an Anglican priest who played a leading role in helping reduce Uganda's HIV infection rate. He is concerned about what he sees in other parts of Africa.
The situation is so bad. It is devastating Africans. In some countries, if not all, the priests are left with the work of burying their parishioners. Personally, I know that God has a plan for Africa.
Mugarura and others believe that plan includes the church.
The Black church has always been at the forefront of social issues. And HIV/AIDS is a social issue. Not only is it a social issue, but it is a matter of life and death.
As people of color, we know that it has been the faith community that has been our vehicle for survival.
Helping heal a hurting continent is why the Balm in Gilead is joining hands together with African faith community leaders in Côte d'Ivoire, Nigeria, Tanzania, Kenya, and Zimbabwe, nations that each have a significant number of people infected and affected by HIV and AIDS.
There's something about the preciousness and the sacredness of this continent that can't be explained in words. You have to experience it.
The Balm in Gilead's partnership with Africa began in 2002 with a grueling and extensive schedule that took the team to 6 countries in 6 weeks.
22 years ago, the faith community did not understand its role because of the political nature of HIV. But now when we see our people just being slaughtered by this virus, I see every day bishops and imams are coming to my doorstep every day saying, we want to do something. Help us to save our people.
It was a journey that began 10,000 miles away from New York City, in the West African nation of Côte d'Ivoire.
We describe our partnership with Africa faith communities as one as equal. Our partnership is that we are coming in to support the existing infrastructure.
From the capital, Abidjan, the team headed up north to the idyllic city of Yamoussoukro, home to one of the world's largest basilicas, La Basilique Notre-Dame de la Paix, the Basilica of Our Lady of Peace. This beautiful African basilica in the middle of Africa's tropical rainforest seemed to be a good vantage point to begin pondering the long road ahead.
Without the faith community involved with HIV, our people are going to perish. The stigma of HIV, the myths and ignorance around HIV can only be broken by the faith community.
Built in the 1980s by the late Ivorian head of state Houphouët-Boigny, it is here that thousands of Ivorians come to worship each week. They come looking to heaven for an answer to the country's many challenges. For more than 20 years, Africa has been hard hit by the HIV/AIDS pandemic.
Fighting AIDS is that you must be on the front line. You know that it is either death or life. Someone fighting at war knows that the bullet is coming to claim his or her life. This is the case of AIDS.
In country after country, the fabric of society is being stretched to the limit. Every facet of community has been affected. Family structures are crumbling, economies devastated, millions of lives cut short.
The greatest thing you can do for any man who is dying is to show him love. And God is love.
Our grief is one, and our love for each other is one.
Black people are a spiritual people wherever they are in the world. So I think that that's one of the things that we have in common that we have not lost. It plays a critical role in not only the disease, but in life itself. The prayer for the healing of AIDS is very, very important. It's the way we've connected with people in our communities in the U.S., and it's the way that we're connecting with people here in Africa. They understand when we talk about prayer. They understand when we talk about spirituality. And it's through that vehicle that we have come together and have eliminated the distance that we've had for the hundreds of years that we have been separated from the continent.
While Africa is a continent of different religions, especially Christianity and Islam, there is one thing both faith communities have in common: Each has been equally devastated by the scourge of AIDS.
People are dying, and the disease does not ask, are you a Christian? Are you a Muslim? Do you believe in God? That's not a question the disease cares about.
Africa's faith community is all too aware of the critical role spirituality can play in the fight against the AIDS pandemic. It knows that faith will help millions live through and beyond the Holocaust.
The church will always be with the people. That is part of the training we do in order to reach out to those so that they accept the reality and have peace in their mind.
Undoubtedly, it is very important for religious organizations to be very much involved. To start with, faith organizations are closest to the people.
We leave this work to, say, the government alone, we will not succeed. But I'm sure if we all cooperate, plus the church, I'm sure some success will be registered.
The church must embrace it. The church must mobilize itself, must mobilize every resource at her disposal and plunge into this battle against AIDS. Because to drive out AIDS from the African continent is a task that must be done.
To ignore this calling would be a major tragedy for the African American community, for the African continent. We must break the silence and speak so that people's lives can be saved.
As people of faith, we must dialogue with one another. As people of faith, we must have a conversation. As partners, we must join hands together to heal a hurting continent. The question is, who will hear the cry? Who will hear the call? Who will go?